Okay, start the shiur in גיטין. The last shiur in גיטין for Chodesh Cheshvan, I think, because I don't know what's going to be next week. We're going to deal with Sa'if Hey, even though that according to say that our limud was supposed to be already past that, and if the shiur this week was supposed to be in past Sa'if Hey, but Sa'if Hey is very important Sa'if as the other ones are, and I will not. I don't want to pass that Sa'if without giving a full share on it. The Sa'if Hey discusses the topics of appointing a sefer and edim via writing rather than via saying. So the tour starts that even a pikeach that writes with his own handwriting to the sefer and the edim with his own handwriting, they should write and sign a get. They cannot write and sign a get until they hear directly from his mouth. And somebody who hears and does not talk, it means he was able to talk at some point, and he's not able to talk, or he's not able to talk, it also doesn't work. The Tur brings that the Rambam holds that if somebody was able to talk back in the day, and then now he became that he cannot talk anymore, nishtatek, then it does work bichsav. The Rosh holds, the Tur says that the Rosh holds like the first opinion that it doesn't help, bichlal, to write bichsav, to appoint bichsav yad. The Beis Yosef explains why is that. That goes based on, it says lapuki from the opinion of Rav Kahana. What is Rav Kahana saying? Gemara, the cheresh that talks, because the Mishnah says that yishmu koiloi, they have to hear his voice saying it. And then and over there in the Gemara, Rav Kahana says that cheresh that speaks but can't hear, which means that he was, when he got married, he was fully a pikeach, and now he's deaf. That means that he was a bedaitoi during Kiddushin, and his Kiddushin are Kiddushin Gemurim. Then you are allowed to do ksiva. You are allowed to appoint a sefer and edim through writing because he's considered a full pikeach. That's Rav Kahana's opinion. Rav Yosef asked on him. So if so, what's Rav Kahana's big chiddush? Somebody who is nishtatek, we already know that he could do through arkana, through nodding his head 3 times. And you do a bdika, and you do arkana, he does arkana 3 times, and you give a get. So what's the big chiddush of Rav Kahana that by this nishtatek, it is, you could do it through ksav yadoi? So Rav Zera says that no, the cheresh that we're talking about, that Rav Kahana is talking about, is a cheresh gamur that doesn't hear and doesn't speak, and that's what Rav Kahana says, that such a cheresh could do al yidei ksav. But if it's a cheresh, who speaks, that means he could talk but he can't hear, or he can't talk but he could hear, he's considered a full pikeach, and he definitely could be megarish. The Rosh discusses this, and the Rosh explains that when the Gemara says Achi Yishmu Koiloi, the Mishnah says Achi Yishmu Koiloi, this is referring to, that the Mishnah is trying to exclude that, is talking about somebody who cannot say anything. He cannot be mashmiya koil. And therefore, ksiva will not help for such a person either. But by a pikeach, l'chayra, ksiva should work. Why? Because it can't be any less than arkana. By arkana we say that it works for a nishtatek. So ksiva should work the same way as a nishtatek. That's what it seems like what the Rosh holds. According to the Rabbeinu Tam, ksav yodoi never helps. If so, means this is also the Rosh brings in the second opinion, because arkana is better because it shows that he does something with his own body. He shakes his head, so that's a ma'aseh begufa, just like talking is a ma'aseh begufa. So that's compared to speaking. But ksav yodoi doesn't work. So So that is the first. That's what the Rosh brings. Sorry, it's not the second. It's the first explanation based on Rabbeinu Tam, that maybe Ksav Yodai should not work for Bichlal, or the reason why Ksav Yodai doesn't work and is different than Nishtatek and Arkana is because by Nishtatek the Chachamim gave Takonas Agonis. They gave that the person that because Takonas Agonis Chachamim were makel that you do not have to hear it, but and Harkana does work. But by Pikeach it doesn't work. So basically the two answers of the Rosh are, two ways of understanding of the Rosh are, either that the heter of Arkana is because Arkana is better than Ksav Yodai, and therefore the writing would not, lav davka, the writing would help. And the second opinion is that Harkana, there was a specific heter for Harkana because of Takonas Agunos, and maybe Ksav Yodai is the same as Harkana mitzad Takonas Agunos, and therefore you should be, and therefore that would only work by Nishtatek, but not by a Pikeach. So regardless of which we're going to look at it, the Pikeach, it's not going to work. The only question is, by a Nishtatek, whether it's going to work with Ksav Yodai or not. And the Rosh seems to be machriya, like the first opinion. That's how the Torah understands him, because he says that it doesn't work. He says that the first opinion, his father holds like the first opinion, that it does not work, not like the Rambam says that it does work. Taisvis, there's different ways of understanding Taisvis. In Taisvis, it says that the mashmos of Taisvis is that Harkana and voice has the same thing. Why? Because both of them show what he wants to do. Both of them show that this is what he wants to do. He wants to give a get. And the Rosh and the Beis Yosef says that so is mashma also from Yerushalmi. That's what the Beis Yosef quotes from there. You're going to see later in the Pri Chodesh, says that from Yerushalmi is mashma punkt fakert, but right now Beis Yosef says that it's mashma got from the Yerushalmi. Then comes the shit of the Ran, just summarizing what the Beis Yosef says. The Ran comes and says that when that we don't follow Rav Kahana is only by a Cheresh Gamur, and that is what he was trying to say, that a Cheresh Gamur is kosher, and it comes from the Mishnah Koiloi Farker, that we do not follow what Rav Kahana says. But if he's not a Cheresh Gamur, either he's a Medaber Veina Shemea, Shemea Veina Medaber, then they are considered like a Pikeach. You do a Bdika, and Ksiva would work. But by a complete Cheresh, even though Rav Kahana was Matir, Ksiva will not help, because the way Taisus understands it, because Ksiva will still not prove that he's Ois Shoita, does not prove that he's a Pikeach. Still a suffix whether he knows what he's doing or not. And therefore, if he's only half a Shemea, then we could look at him as that we know that he's a Pikeach. But by a Cheresh Gamur, we do not look at him we're not sure he's a Pikeach, and therefore Ksav Yodai will not help. But obviously, if a Pikeach, complete Pikeach, speaks and writes b'chsav yodai, l'cha'ira, it should work. That's what seems from the Ran. And the Ran says, however, from Tosefta it's mashma that it's not so, that you cannot rely on, that by a pikeach you cannot do it, and therefore it's better to be machmer. Beis Yosef explains it's mashma from the Ran, that this is somebody who needs bdika before harkana, which means the nishtatek, we have to do the bdikas before to make sure that he's b'daitai. Same thing also you have to do a bdika for him before he writes. But it's, the Beis Yosef points out, from the Gemara it's not mashma like that. From the Gemara it's mashma that only by harkana you need the bdika, because you want to make sure that he understands what the nodding means. But by ksiva, you need it's not mashma that you have to do any bdika. Why? Because the ksiva itself proves that he's a pikeach. And if he's a medaber veina shemeya, then obviously he does not need bdika when he says it with his own mouth. That doesn't say it anywhere else. So if you're going to require bdika, bdika is only required by harkana because you want to make sure that harkana is done properly, that he understands what harkana is, and that he understands what he's doing. But if he writes, or a medaber ve'eino shomea who actually speaks, by both of these scenarios, that is already enough of a proof that he's a pikeach. Therefore, you do not have to do any bdika. And he says that the same thing is also mashma, similar as mashma from the Rambam. That if somebody was neshtatik and you have to do, and you're doing a harkana, the nodding of the head, then you need to do a bdika. But when the Rambam talks about ksiva, he only says kaisrin. He doesn't say boitkim. So therefore, it's and therefore it means that by ksiva you don't have to do the bdika. However, even according to the Rambam, who's mekel, a complete cheresh doesn't work ksiva, and doesn't even work remiza, even if daite mirusheves alav, even if we know that he's fully with it. And then the Rambam has an exception that the medaber ve'eino shomea he considers a mecheresh gomer that can't be megarish. That's the Rambam's view on the medaber ve'eino shomea, that the cheresh of the Gemara is somebody who doesn't hear, and whether he talks or he doesn't talk, he's considered a shoita. But by somebody who hears and he's neshtatik, then by ksiva it doesn't seem like from the Rambam you need bdika. But by harkana it seems like you do need bdika. The Rabbeinu Yerucham takes a little bit of a different approach to this whole thing. It's also all brought in the Beis Yosef that even somebody who's matir to appoint a sefer in the Edom through ksav yodai, by a pikeach it won't work. That means until now it seemed like from everyone that whoever is matir ksav yodai by a ilay, malachas kam v'kam by a pikeach. But whoever is machmer in both. But Rabbeinu Yerucham says no. The heter for ksav yodai that were matir, the ones who are matir ksav yodai by a ilaim by nishtatek is specific for that. By a pikeach it doesn't work like that. And he also claims that that's how it's mashma from the Yerushalmi. Like I mentioned to you, after the Pri Chodesh is going to say that the Yerushalmi says forget, but this is how Rabbeinu Yerucham understands the Yerushalmi. Why is that? Because a pikeach could talk. If a pikeach could talk, we're not going to give him the leeway of doing it through ksiva. And we're also not going to let him get the leeway of doing it through arkana. Why? Because that is a specific heter of chachamim for a ilaim, for a nishtatik that has no other way of communicating. So therefore the chachamim established you could do arkana, and those who are matir ksiva also established you could do ksiva, but it's a heter. It's not that ksiva is mutter, and the chiddush is that by a nishtatik you could also do ksiva. No. The reason why by nishtatik you could do arkana is the same reason why by nishtatik you could do ksiva. There's no other way to do it. You're stuck. Otherwise the woman is stuck. Takana sagunas, we had to establish it. And that is the opposite of what the Rambam holds. Right? Because the Rambam holds that a pikeach for sure could do b'chsiva. And and the nishtatik could also do ksiva. Why? Because the Rambam says that it's not a heter. The question is, what shows his intent? So if a harkana shows his intent by a ilaim, ksiva shows his intent by a ilaim. If ksiva works to show intent, it will also work for a pikeach to show his intent. The Itur holds the same thing as the Rambam. According to Maskonas Harosh, what seems like from the Rosh, and the Rashba and the Ran, each one for a different reason, for a different and from a different element, whether it's Roy Lahachmer, whether because he has a suffix, what the best explanation is, whether because they hold it's completely Aser, but all of them are Machmer by a Pikeach to write, to appoint to appoint Bechsav. That means the Rosh, the Rashba, the Ran, the Mordechai, the Sefer Truma, and the Smak. Which means that when we say in the beginning La'apukim et Rav Kahana that we want to that the Mishnah of Koiloi excludes what Rav Kahana holds, it means that we're excluding the whole din of Ksiva. That Koiloi tells you, Achi Yishmu Koiloi means that if you don't hear his voice, that means any form of ksiva doesn't work. It's not a discussion whether a cheresh is like this, or a ilim is like this, or a cheresh is like that. The koiloi that we're bringing from the Mishnah is to undo the svara that ksiva will work in a certain scenario. And the Beis Yosef says that the Radach holds that the mokim igun you could be mekel. And why is that? Because the Radach holds that the whole Issur is only midivrei seifrim, not midiraisa. It seems like from the Lashon of the Beis Yosef that he also holds that the people who are machmer are only machmer on it midivrei seifrim and not midiraisa. Now, if you have somebody who is, whichever way you want to say that we were matir by a nishtatik, certain scenarios, we were matir harkana. Is harkana better than ksiva, or is harkana not better than ksiva? So the Rashba seems to take the approach that harkana is better than ksiva because it's a maisa begufoy. The harkana is moving his head is the same thing as the voice coming out of his head. So the harkana and koil is the same way. And that is, but ksiva is not, and that is the first explanation of the Rosh. But the Tosfos and the Rosh himself in the second explanation, the reason is because it kilu b'mokim igun, that they were mekel only in the mokim igun. They were mekel to do harkana, not because harkana is better than writing, but the mokim igun was there. And the reason why harkana is better than writing and we're oiser writing is because if you look in the Tosefta, it says a get bottle when it's talking about ksiva. And therefore, to say that by ksiva you would be mekel is a big thing because the Tosefta says get bottle. So therefore, we don't want get bottle means deraisa. So according to the Rosh and the Tosfos, even if they themselves don't hold that it's a mamash deraisa, but you're not going to take chances with something which is a suffix deraisa. So therefore, even when we allow harkana because of mokum igun, we're not going to allow ksiva because of mokum igun. According to the Rashba, we're not going to allow ksiva b'mokum igun because it's not as good as harkana. Harkana is more similar to voice than ksiva. The Beis Yosef then concludes in kundreisim b'shem riyah that those who are matir, gives a different way, even those who are matir b'chsav yodoi by is only when the person writes it in front of the Eidim, in front of the Sefer, and gives it to them in their hand. Writes it and gives it right away, but not that he takes and he sends them a letter with appointing them to do it. And there are poskim which follow that opinion. And the reason is very simple. Before we're going to get into the rest of the poskim and to understand what the Shulchan Aruch says, just give you a quick 1-minute rundown. When somebody lives in a place that you cannot write gitin, or there is nobody who knows how to write gitin, there's a lot of poskim which say the concept of kisvu or tenu, that he goes in front of a bezdin and he says, he reads a statement that he appoints Sefer and he appoints Eidim, Shalai Bifneim, and then that paper is sent. The question is, forget about whether that works, appointing Shalai Bifneim. What happens if it's done by writing? If a person writes a letter, and the letter, he does not say what it says in the letter, he just writes the letter. Does it work or not? From a lot of poskim, it's mashma that yes, based on how they understand the shita of the Rambam, that ksiva would work in a specific case of mokim igun. But according to the kundreisim, it would only work if the person is right in front of him, because that way he's giving them the appointment bifneim. Masha'enken, if he sends them a letter, the kundreisim compares it to omer imru. And by omer imru, which we spoke in the previous year, big machlokes if it works or not, if it's deraisa derabanan, and therefore, being that it's sent, the letter is sent, so it's as if he's telling the person to transfer the appointment to them, omer imru, and then it doesn't work. So you have those that say that b'mokim igun is muter b'chsav yoda even by a pikeach. There are those that say that it's dafke when b'mokim igun, when the husband is not there. And there are those that say it's dafke when the husband is there. And that's the only way that it works. It means if the Eidim and the Sefer are there in front of the husband. And then there are those that say that it only works. Just giving you a summary of all the places. There's like 10, 15 in each category. Tshuvas that discuss, take different approaches based on the situation. So you have those that were mekel by a pikeach. We're talking about a pikeach. If only if the husband is not there. That means if the husband is not in the same place as the Sefer and the Eidim. There are those that say that you don't need Mokim Igun, and you could always rely on Ksav Yodeh by a Pikeach as long as the Sefer and the Eidim are not there. So it's a Tzoyrech, but it's not an Igun. There are those that hold that it only works if it's done B'fneim. There are those that hold that Ksav Yodeh doesn't help Bichlal. And then there are those that hold that the heter is only by Ilaim, like Rabbi Yerucham, by Nishtatek, but not by a Pikeach. And then you have even those who are Oyser, there's a machlekes if the Isser is Deraisa, or the Isser is Midrabanan. Now, I just want to point out to you that before we're going to get to the Tzemach Tzedek soon, but it seems that Tzemach Tzedek has his own shit on how to understand it. Just to point out to you, I'm not going to get into it now, but there is the Divrin Nechemia takes the approach that he understands the Rosh, that the Rosh holds that it's Batul Midiraisa, not Pasal Midirabana, and which is hard to understand the way from Tzemach Tzedek is mashma that's not so. But as the Divrin Nechemia understands that it's Batul Midiraisa, according to the Rosh. But there are other opinions which hold that it's mutter. Therefore, that the Divrin Nechemia paskins there's a suffix deraisa, and a suffix deraisa she's suffix meguresh. That's the Divrin Nechemia. We're not going to get into it now. Now we're going to move to the Mechaber. The Mechaber says that whether he's a cheresh, or he's a ilaim, or he's a pikeach, you can't do al yidei aksav until sheyishmu koile. V'yesh machshirim. There are those who are matir by somebody who is nishtatek to write and to sign according to based on his appointment in writing. There's two ways of understanding who the yesh machshirim is. Either that the yesh machshirim is like Rabbeinu Yerucham, that we're only machshir by a nishtatek, or the yesh machshirim is like the Rambam, Machshir also by a pikeach, and there are certain mefarshim that understood, certain Nesikim that understood that the Mechaber holds like Rabbeinu Yerucham, that it's only by a ilaim, and certain ones understood that it's also by a pikeach. I'm just going to go through them now. The Beis Shmuel, we're going to start now with the Beis Shmuel. The Beis Shmuel Sifkot Neches says by a pikeach. Some say that it works al yidei aksav, some say that it doesn't work al yidei aksav, and therefore it is a suffix deraisa. That's the Beis Shmuel's view on it. So it becomes a suffix deraisa. Not like we understood the Beis Yosef that it's a suffix derabanan. There's a suffix deraisa, it's a suffix megureshes, and he says, you have the Radach who says about mokim igun you could be mekel. He says the Darkei Moshe himself, the Ramah and Darkei Moshe put the tzarich in the Radach. So therefore, don't worry about what the Radach. I don't know if you say don't worry, but it seems like the Radach is not. The Ber Heitev brings the Radach. He brings the Maram Mitrani that they were mekel by a pikeach. This is where he explains that the Radach, what the Radach is talking about a pikeach, the Maram Mitrani also, by a pikeach is, you could do it through Ksav Yodeh b'mokim igun, and he brought the same thing in the Shvus Yaakov, also holds that it works b'mokim igun. The Pischei Tshuva, who continues what the Bar Heitev started, says the same thing you're also going to see in the Shas Shus Maram Brisk, and that the Maram Brisk relied on the Get Pashat and relied on other Rishonim, we're still going to get them, that he also holds that by a pikeach it works b'chsav yadai. Elamai, the Maram Brisk came up with this idea, which is what today a lot of what didn't follow, that if you write a minui from far to write the get in a different city, he should first say it Baal Peh in front of the Eidim. He's going to say it, and he's going to say in front of the Eidim, I appoint Plain and Pliny to be a Sefer, and Plain and Pliny to be Eidim, etc. And then he should write B'chsav Yodai, or he could write before, but he reads it in front of them. And then it's no longer like Omer Imru. And he says the Marashal himself was Bechlal Mekel and Omer Imru. So if you want to compare it to Omer Imru, the Marashal was Mekel Mokim Igun, which we already know from last year that Alter Rebbe focuses on it. And he says, even though the Beis Ephraim says, the Pesach Tshuva says, even though the Beis Ephraim says that you should be Machmir, still in all, if you want to follow the Maram Brisk, that you combine the two, the saying, the appointing the Sefer and Eidim Shel Befonov, and writing it afterwards, B'chsav, then the Chayre should work. But the Pesach Tshuva concludes that L'maise tzorich iyun rav bekibutz chachamim. A lot of specific cases, don't just jump to do it. It has to be specific. A bunch of chachamim should sit and discuss exactly what's going to be done, and take it from there. The Pri Chadash, as usual, very lengthy. A couple columns on this topic, a column and a half, 2 columns. So, goes on Sif Hey, brings the Beis Yosef in the beginning regarding Gecheresh and Eilim, and then in the second big paragraph of the Pri Chadash, Dibra Maschel Avol, says that what the Beis Yosef says that by Nishtatek, it does work, Ksav Yodai would work. He says that even it's mashma like that from a Yerushalmi. He says when you look at the Yerushalmi, it's mashma punkt verkehrt. And Yerushalmi is written Sai in Trumois and Sai in Gitin. That over there, the Yerushalmi, by the Yerushalmi, it's clearer that they were memayet any form of writing from Koilei. And they write that the get is bottle. Seems like a get is bottle. And the Pri Chadash says that from the Yerushalmi, mashma, vada, it's clearly, it makes no difference whether he's a pikeach or whether he's a nishtatek. Even if they write b'di'eved, it doesn't work. Get bottle min ha'Torah. That's the position of the Pri Chadash. And he says that you can understand Tosfos to hold that way also. So he says the fact that the Beis Yosef understood Tosfos differently, he says you can be medaik from Tosfos verkehrt. And he says in the Radach that was Mekel b'Mokim Igun, it's clearly evident that the Radach didn't see the Yerushalmi. If the Radach would see the Yerushalmi, he would never say such a thing. And he says could be, ultimately he doesn't want to argue on the Beis Yosef. He says could be that when the Beis Yosef writes Pasol, he doesn't mean Pasol mid'Rabbanan, he means Pasol mid'Oraisa, which essentially means the same thing as get bottle. And he continues towards the next few paragraphs down, Seif Davar, Shein lahakal edek ksav yodai, af b'mokim igun, loy b'pikeach, v'loy b'medaber v'nei shemei v'nei medaber, u'deloi ketshuvas maradach. Yeah, because of ksiva, miu b'pikeach, edei arkana yesh lahakal. But Pikeach, if he does Harkana, just like when Nishtatek Harkana works, Pikeach also Harkana works if it's specifically for, if it's needed for whatever reason, because Shmias HaKoil is the same thing as Harkana. Harkana, so it seems like he takes the approach that the reason why Harkana is mutter is because Harkana is Maisa Begufay, just like Koil is Maisa Begufay. But the Ksiva is not Maisa Begufay, which is completely batal min ha'Torah. He says, the Mabit held that b'mokim igun a pikeach could use ksav yodai. He says all his words einam elo divrei tema. It's all mufrach. Hu pashut hu shlo loy lahatir af b'mokim igun. It's clear that he shouldn't have. Probably he also made a mistake. Now the Levush follows the opinion of the Rabbini. It seems like it understands. I mentioned to you before that some people understand the Mechaber to follow Rabbeinu Yerucham, and some people understand the Mechaber to follow the Rambam about when the Yesh Matirim is to write B'chsav Yodai. So the Levush understood it, the simple reading of the Mechaber, that Yesh Matirim is only by a Nishtatek, not by a pikeach. Only by nishtatik we do that because of takanas agunas. But a pikeach that could talk doesn't work. And he says the same thing by a medaber ve'enei shemeya, that by the levush says a medaber ve'enei shemeya also could only do it by speaking because he has koil, which is exact opposite of what the Rambam holds. So the way he understood the mechaber is to follow Rabbeinu Yerucham, not the Rambam. So any medaber works, but any medaber cannot do through the ksav, and only somebody who cannot talk is the one who could do it through the ksav. Now, just like the Pri Chodesh wrote a long arichis one way, the Get Pashut wrote a long arichis the other way. He also summarizes the whole Bis Yosef, and he says that yes, according to the Rosh, if you say that Harkana is a special, that Harkana is like Koil, and because Maisa Begufay, the first answer of the Rosh, that Harkana is like Koil, but Ksiva is completely not good, so then the get would be considered get batal. And he says that whole thing, the way the Beis Yosef understood that according to the Rosh, first teretz, the get is batal by ksive, doesn't make sense. First of all, he says the first teretz of the Rosh was only written as a maybe. He himself was mesupek. Second of all, he brings an answer that Arkana and ksive are the same thing. Third of all, and somewhere else in the Rosh, a different place, it's mashma, the ksav yodeh does work. And he says, and the fact that the Tur says that he's machmir is because he probably did not see what the Rosh wrote somewhere else, which is a hard way to say it. It's very hard to say he didn't see what his father wrote. What the Rashba and the Ran were machmir is only because they looked at the Rif as completely mekel and they looked at the Teis as completely machmer. Yeah, but the Rif is not completely mekel. The Teisvus is not completely machmer. And the Rif takes apart the Teisvus. So therefore, the way the Rif understands takes apart the Teisvus, therefore you don't have to worry about the Teisvus, the Rashba, and the Ran were machmer because they want to follow Teisvus. But if they would properly learn the Rif, they would not be so adamant against it. Number 5, fifth reason, to create a machloikus so extreme between the Rosh and the Rambam, that according to the Rambam, Ksav Yodeh is kosher, completely. And according to the Rosh, Ksav Yodeh, teretz, the first teretz is mamish bottom in a Torah, is hard to say. Sixth reason, it doesn't make sense that the Rosh is going to say that you can give one teretz where the option is that the ksiva is completely batal, and according to the second teretz that b'mokim igun heitiru, that's completely kosher. You want to say you can't have two terutzim which are so completely opposite each other. One is completely kosher, one is completely batal. Not only that you don't make the Rosh and the Rambam such a big thing. Even within the Rosh himself, the first teretz of the Rosh, that Arkana is better than Ksiva because Maisa Begufay, and you want to say it's batal, doesn't make sense. You at least say it's pasul midrabanan. And then the second one, that Arkana was mutter because of Mokim Igun, it's okay, so it's not even possible with the Rabbana. But they take an extreme that according to one that you take that you give two answers. One answer you give that's bottom in a Torah, and one answer that's kosher even with the Rabbana, is very hard to do it. And he says ultimately the Radach himself was mekel, and the Radach is not the only one. There's a lot of other Rishonim which are also mekel. The Beis Yosef didn't bring every Rishon that's there. But he says the Radach is not a open checkbook that you could do whatever you want. The Radach himself is only, he says the way he understands the heter of the Radach is, if the Sofer and the Eidim recognize the handwriting of the husband. That means the husband wrote the letter, so they're not befanov, they're far away, but they recognize the handwriting. And then is when it works. Like Arkana, the same as Kailai, it's all the same. Why? It's as if he's standing in front of them. But if the husband is not the one who wrote it, and the Sefer and the Eidim do not recognize it, then it's like Omer Imru, and you get into that child of Omer Imru. And he says, you have the Mabit who's even more Mekel, which is the Mabit that we brought in the Pri Chodesh. The Pri Chodesh says that he Bechlal was Mekel and Shaloi Kadin. He says the Mabit is Mekel even when the husband is not the one who writes B'chsav Yodai, but Eidim write, and the husband just signs. He says that's too much. That's Mamash Omer Imru. So he says in 3 times, he says it throughout this Sa'if, the Get Pashut, in 3 places explains it throughout the Sa'if, that B'mokim Igun, Kosav V'chsav Yodoi, specific works. And then he says that Harkone, in the next Sa'if Kotan, he says, but Ksive is different than Harkone. He says Harkone by Apikeach doesn't work. It comes up with a whole different view. Until now, we didn't hear such an opinion. Harkone by Apikeach doesn't work because he could talk. And that doesn't fit, not according to the first answer of the Rosh, not according to the second answer of the Rosh. According to the first answer of the Rosh, Harkone and Koil is the same. So why should we be matir Harkone if they have Koil? According to the second answer of the Rosh, that Harkone was only b'mokim igun instead of Koil. And that's why Ksav Yodei works. So Harkone should also not work over here either. So Harkone for Epikeach does not work. But Aidei Ksav for Epikeach does work. And then he says, and when the Ramah, and when the Mechaber writes, V'yesh matirim, and that's how the Get Pashut Paskins, like the Yesh matirim, it's like the Rambam. The Ksiva works even for Epikeach, and for sure for an Ishtatik. And not like Rabbeinu Yerucham, that the Ksiva only works for an Elim. That's even though the Lashon of the Mechaber, it seems like it's only by Nishtatik, but he says no, when the Mechaber writes that, he refers to everyone. And he again writes a 3rd time that Mokim Igun were Mekel, and then at the end of Sifkot Lamed Aleph, he concludes and he explains why Be'etzim you could be Mekel, even Harkone by Epikeach. Even though earlier he writes that Harkone by Epikeach is a big problem to be matir, he says that based on the Mechaber, the Yesh Matirim of the Mechaber, and based on the Rambam, the Chayru, you could say that Harkone by Epikeach would work. Teras Gitin has a kasha on now we move to Teras Gitin on the Seif. He says that by the Teras Gitin is in the back of your Shulchan Aruch, so you can always look at it, it's not so long. He says that when the Bishmul says that's mashma pretty clearly from the Bishmul, that he holds that Ksav Yoda is Safek Deraisa. But he says it's a big problem because what the Bishmul earlier writes, that you don't need Shluchas, you only need Lishma, which is only a Derabanon. If you say that the Kosav is only Midin Lishma, which is a Derabanon, and not Midin Shluchas, that's a Deraisa, so how could it be that over here it becomes Safek Deraisa? The way the Bishmul holds is like the ones that hold that the Kosav is only Midin Lishma, and therefore you have a Shaila. But it can't be more than it can't become a Safek Deraisa. The most it could become is a Safek Derabanan. Can't even become a Safek Deraisa. And then he says that when the Radach says that a Mokim Igun you could be Mekel, it's clearly referring to a Pikeach, not to Elim, only by a Pikeach, but by a Cheresh, someone who doesn't hear, it's possible with Rabbanan. This is all by way of introduction. Let's move on to the Tzemach Tzedeks. Tzemach Tzedek and Siman Kuf Mem Hei Ois Beis, which in your books is page 138. I'm not going to go through, read it inside. Over there was talking about a case where the Eidim received the Minui by writing, and the Sefer was appointed. Tzemach Tzedek Siman Kuf Mem Hei is a question when the Sefer was appointed by the husband, and he heard the appointment by the husband, but the Eidim were not there, and they received the appointment b'chsav. And over there in Ois Beis, he goes into the discussion in this Sif, and he says the Beis Yosef has a suffix if Ksav Yoda is moil or not. It's pretty clear the Beis Yosef is mesupek. The Mishnah Melech is mekel. The Radach, that's completely Mekel, we have a problem because the Raman Darkei Moshe says Tzarich, and the Bishmol also says Tzarich. Well, quotes Darkei Moshe. And he says, and you have the Pri Chodosh who says that it's completely, that it's Asur, that it's get Batal Midiraisa, and based in the Yerushalmi. Tzemach Tzedek says that Pri Chodosh didn't understand the Yerushalmi. Because if you look at the Yerushalmi, it seems from the Yerushalmi that Ksiva does work. Elamai, we had Exeda, that he's going to be busy writing things, he's not going to know what he's going to get mixed up with the things he's writing. He might be writing a different shtar, he's not going to realize that he's writing for a get. And that's why the Yerushalmi is Oyser Ksiva. But not because Ksiva doesn't work like a Pri Chodosh understood it, because the Yerushalmi Ksiva does work. We have a worry that maybe it's completely Asr, not because it's not a viable transfer of a viable appointment, but because it's Exeda, maybe he's going to get mixed up between this document and another document. He's busy writing documents on his desk. He might get mixed up, he's not going to have the right thing. But over here, you don't have that problem. Why? Because he clearly said to the Eidim, to the Sefer, to do it. So he knows what he's doing. And to the Eidim, he wrote afterwards, the same time as he was with the Sefer, he wrote a letter to the Eidim. Not only that, he says the Eidus, the appointment of the Eidim, Bechsav, has on it the Kiyum Bezdin. And the Kiyum Bezdin proves that he was with his right mind. He continues and he says the Bar Heitev brings a Shvus Yaakov, and the Shvus Yaakov was Mekel in a Mumor B'Mokim Igun. So therefore we have all these opinions that it's mutter. Continues, he says the Ma'ari Ben Lev and Chel Gimel, Siman Tzaddik Gimel says that she's a Safek Megureshes. But the Ma'ari Ben Lev is talking about when he appointed also the Sofer, Bechsav. Over here, he only appointed the Eidim. And the Sofer heard by himself. And we already know, and we know that Tzemach Tzedek L'Shitase, and we saw it by the Alter Rebbe also in the previous shir, that there's a big difference between Eidich Simah, by Omer Imru, there's a difference between Eidich Simah and Sofer. By a Sofer, it's a Safek Deraisa. By Eidim, it might not even be a Safek Derabban. And the same thing he said there, Tzemach Tzedek says over here, by Eidich Simah, even for Mamash Pasol, it's only a Psum different Sofer. So therefore he says, all of those who are Machmer in Ksiva, and those who are machmer so much to say that the Safek Deraisa is only regarding appointing a Sofer, not appointing Eidim. And according to the ones who are matir, they're obviously being matir a Sofer, because that's a machlekes. Whether a Sofer, you could appoint a Sofer B'Chsav Yadai, or you cannot appoint a Sofer B'Chsav Yadai. So, but according to both of them, appointing Eidim B'Chsav Yadai, either it's mutter, or it's only possible midrabanan. And he says that that's all clearly mashma from the Bishmol in the previous topic in Omer Imru, that over there, that he holds that Kosav is Lishma, only the Inyan of Lishma, which becomes only a Safek Midrabanan, similar to the Teres Gitin. And the diuk of the Bishmol, that when the Ramah says that have a Safek Megureshes regarding Omer Imru, he only says Sofer and doesn't say Eidim, which means that by Eidim it's not a Safek Deraisa. And he says, and this is also clearly in the Alter Rebbe's Tshuva, the Alter Rebbe's Tshuva regarding Omer Imru, B'Mokim Igun, which that's what we discussed in previous share. And he says, and even though the Teras Gitin regarding Omer Imru says that Ksiva and Chsime are the same thing, and therefore by Omer Imru, and therefore becomes a Safek Mideraisa, that's not so. He explains it over here. He also explained it there. He also was poirech the Teres Gitin there. And he continues and he says, he brings more proofs that even according to those who are machmer by Ksiva, it's even though they're machmer by Ksiva, it's only by Eidich Simah, it still remains only a Safek Midirabanan, it will never become a Safek Midiraisa. And therefore he says, by Eidim, the Machmirim says it can't be more than a Safek Derabanan. And since it can't be more than a Safek Derabanan, you could join those together with the Rambam and everybody else who says it's for sure mutter, not that it's Asim Derabanan. And but only when it's Safek Derabanan. It means only for Eidim. For a Sefer, you can't do it. The same thing he writes in Siman Kuf Mem Vav, that regarding the Eidim, it does work, because it's only midrabanan. And he says that when it comes to well, he says that you just remember that even because it is a heter, because it's only midrabanan, and we combine it together with the people who are matir, we're only going to be matir in the mokim igun. And he says, and the Eidim should actually see the letter that the Sefer, that the husband sent them. And then, not only that, they should bring this letter from the Eidim in front of a Bezdin in town. The letter from the husband appointing the Eidim should be brought to the Bezdin where the get is being written, and show it to them. And they should be Mekayim the Chsimis. They should testify on those Chsimis. That means, how did this happen? There was a husband in, let's call it in some 10-hour drive from here, and he went in front of two Eidim, and he said, and he signed in front of two Eidim, I appoint these two to be my Eidim, and the Sefer was there also, so he appointed the Sefer Bifneim, but the appointing the Eidim was done b'chsav yadoi, and these two Eidim signed it. And now these two Eidim go and they bring the tzeta, they drove the 10 hours back with this paper and the Sefer, they drove back to New York to write the get. And then they go, and Tzemach Tzedek says, these two Eidim who brought you the paper, who signed on the paper, should go in front of the local Bezdin here in New York and testify that what happened b'fneihem, that he signed it and he understood what he was doing, etc., etc. And then it gets confirmed by Bezdin, this is Take what happened in front of these two Eidim, and then the Minui is better. But Be'etzem, the Minui al-Yidei Aksav of Eidim is kosher. The same thing is also in Siman Reish Samach Zayin. In Dibur HaMaschil Ach, where he also, over there, he brings what the Shulchan Aruch says regarding over here in Simf Hey regarding Kosev Chsav Yodoi, and he says Taketz Mashma from the Pri Chodosh, there's bottom midiraise, even by a Pikeach, even b'mokim igun. And he says the Pri Chodosh relied on the Yerushalmi, and the Pri Chodosh did not understand the Yerushalmi, and the Rambam and those people b'chlal are meikos. He first introduces the opinions to you. He says that there's a Michtav Melio, he holds similar to the Kundreisim, that if you write in front of the Sefer and the Eidim B'fneim, it's kosher. And then Tzemach Tzedek is Mechadesh, the Sefer HaTruma and the Smag and the Smak and the Rashba, who all say that it's Asur B'chsav Yodoi is only when the Chsav Yodoi is sent. But this is how the Michtav Melio, not the Tzemach Tzedek, the Michtav Melio is Mechadesh. That these, the Sefer HaTruma, the Smak and the Rashba will all be maskim, that if the Baal writes to the Sefer and to the Eidim in front of their faces, it would work. And they were only posted when it was sent. And then he says, yes, there are those who are oyser completely. And then Tzemach Tzedek says, it's b'chal not... you can't say that there's such a thing as oyser completely. Side by Sefer and side by Eidim. Written in front of the Eidim and the Sefer. The Eidei Chsime and the Sefer. And Tzemach Tzedek then goes and explains different svaras. He says maybe Take it only works only b'fneim, like the Michtav Melio. And Ksav Yodoi is obviously, Ksav Yodoi b'fneihem is better than Omer Imru. And Ksav Yodoi, he says, maybe Ksav Yodoi is like Arkana, which should work in certain scenarios, not like the Michtav Melio. And then he continues and he says that from the Lashon Sefer HaTruma and Shar Poiskim, it seems like if you send it, it's like Omer Imru, which becomes a Shaila. But still, if he writes it in front of them, it's fine, because then it's no longer the Shaila of Omer Imru. And therefore he says that if the Sefer, but he says, but that only really, this whole Machlekes, again he says, whole Machlekes only applies to a Sefer, not to Eidim. Therefore if the Sefer was Befanov, and he appointed the Sefer Befanov, even if he appointed the Sefer Bechsav, but the Chsav was Befanov, it works, because that's when it becomes, but not if it's sent. And then we could rely on the Mekilim B'mokim Igun. And he says now, the Tzemach Tzedek says, could be that even according to the Bri Chodesh, who says it's Batel Midiraisa, if it's Bifneim, it will still work. It will still not be possible. And then he says, and now you're going to say, even if you want to compare it to Omer Imru, ultimately, if they follow the instructions of the husband, because Omer Imru, we had the whole Shaila, if the suffix is, because maybe they're going to mess it up. But if they actually follow what the husband wanted, for sure it's not Pasal Midiraisa. It becomes a Shaila of Pasal Midirabban, therefore he says it's Mutter. Then you have a Siman Reish Ayin Daled. The question about appointing a get, sending a get from Siberia. From Siberia. And the whole long seder of Minuyim, and the next, and it's called B'mokim Igun Godil V'otzum. That's the Lashon of Tzemach Tzedek over there. And he says this is how it works. Siman Reish Ayin Daled. He says, first thing is, the husband goes in front of a bezdin in his town, in front of 3 Yidden in his town in Siberia. And he says, Balpeh, I'm appointing this guy to be my Sefer, and I'm appointing these 2 people to be my Eidim. Then he himself writes with his own handwriting what he said, or the bezdin writes it and he signs it. Then the bezdin writes a kiyum under his statement, that the kiyum says, whatever the whole nusach of that the guy came in front of us and said it, and after he said it, he also signed it, etc., etc. Why do we need a kiyum of bezdin? Because then you avoid the problem of that they don't recognize his handwriting. Because then we said before, according to some of the opinions, the kisvu only works if the Ksav Yoder only works if the Eidim recognizes handwriting. But if you have a Kiyum Bezdin, you don't have to worry about the Eidim recognizing his handwriting. Next thing you have to do is the wife appoints a Shliach LeKabbalah in Siberia. And it's going to be for that Shliach LeKabbalah is going to receive a different get. Now they're going to send, because you have the woman was in Siberia and the husband was in Siberia and the woman was in somewhere else far away. So the woman is sitting over here and she's going to receive a get that's written based on this zettel. And then the woman is also appointing a shliach lekabbalah in Siberia shalei befanov. And then the bezdin in Siberia is going to write a get from the husband and give it to the shliach lekabbalah, her shliach lekabbalah, she becomes a gureshes. So that way,
I took it, the one that's sent to her?
Yeah, one is not sent to her. One is written in Siberia directly from the husband, given to her shliach lekabbalah, and one is written by the bezdin in Russia and given to her in her hands. And he says, and this is one of the places, many places, that Tzemach Tzedek says that Shliach LeKabbalah is better than sending things by mail and better than Ksav Yodai. Tzemach Tzedek seems to take the approach that Shliach LeKabbalah is always better than everything else. So now, based on that, you have the issue that a lot of Bati didn't do Kisvut Nu, a lot of Bati didn't send the get by mail, a lot of Bati didn't do these kinds of things. But there are Lubavitch Rabbanim that because Tzemach Tzedek only writes about Migun Gadol and maybe only the Eidim and maybe only the Sefer, and we're not sure if saying it Baal Peh, how saying it Baal Peh works and writing it afterwards works. So when I live Rabbi Fegelstock never does it. I once asked him about it. He says he doesn't do it. No, it doesn't do Minui Al Dei Ksav. Because Tzemach Tzedek is very strict about it today. Tzemach Tzedek says by Sefer it's the Safek Deraisa. However, B'mokim Igun, you could rely on, obviously, the Tzemach Tzedek wrote B'mokim Igun. Elamai, today the people do it Shalei B'mokim Igun, but Tzemach Tzedek only says it B'mokim Igun. So, in Russia, it was B'mokim Igun. After the war, it was dealt with B'mokim Igun. I heard that there was somebody that dealt with גיטין coming from Russia, and he wrote a Ksav Arsha in Russian, and he was by the Rebbe, by Yechidus, the Rebbe was Magiyat. Now, I didn't get a chance to speak about it today. It was Magia, it fixed it. Muga. How to send it. They fixed the language. Should be a better language to use it. I don't have that much time left, but there is a in your book, in page 442, 443, the big thing, everybody knows that the Rebbe did not hold of listening to Megillah through a telephone. There are 3 or 4 letters from the Rebbe regarding Minui Shliach, Minui Sofer Ve'edim through the telephone. And the Rebbe writes that it's completely, the Rebbe writes, Tzorich Iyun Gadol. Why? Because it's not Koil Habal. The husband doesn't hear, the Sofer and the Edom are not hearing the voice of the husband. They're hearing a voice which got created from electrical currents. And the Rebbe says, till today nobody could really define electricity per se. They know how it works, but they can't pinpoint exactly what power electricity has. And therefore what moves through the telephone, through the wires, electricity, it gets converted to electric current and then it gets reconverted back to a voice, but it's not the voice of the husband. They're hearing an electronic voice which got converted from the other electric current that came from the other side. It's.
They both hear Maisa, and then you have something that there is.
But you have, that's what the Tzemach says, you have to kill from Bezdin.
Okay, fine. Is it the same thing or is it not the same thing? Is it the same thing?
No, this is worse, because here's nothing. He says it's nothing. Koila is nothing. And then he says it's
Both of them, the Koil, you're getting the message because of the Maisa, but not.
Yeah, but the question is, what are you getting? Well, you're not getting a piece of paper that you could refer to afterwards. And then he says the same thing applies to Megillah, and yes, there are poskim which paskin you could hear Megillah through the telephone, and the Rebbe says it's clearly from their tshuvas that they wrote to be matir she'ela shebiaru lifnei mahus va'ifim plus a telephone to bazat to sikari. Obviously, they made a big mistake. They don't understand what they're talking about. Now, there's another 2 letters from the Rebbe regarding this. One is Tavshin Lamed Ches, and one is Tavshin Mem Gimel, Dalet. One of them, the Lamed Ches one, is here in your book. And over here, the Rebbe over here says something which is very interesting. He says regarding, again, similar, the same idea, that the Minui, you're going to be Mamane, Sofer, and Edom to write a get, right? But he also, the Rebbe calls it shlichus. It's a midin shlichus. And he says that hearing through the telephone, and this is the answer to you, Nehemiah. He says hearing through the telephone, he says that is birur ha'emes. That yes, that confirms somewhat that the truth is that he said such statements on the other side. But the Sefer didn't hear it. The Sefer is hearing a new voice. And therefore, that new voice is not considered koila, and it doesn't work for the appointment of a Sefer and Edom. Today there are certain Rabbanim which hold that even according to the Rebbe you could do through Zoom because you see and you could see the mouth v'chulu v'chulu. One of the Batidin that I sit in Agudas Rabbanim, even when they did through Zoom, they only did it when he was also signed bifnei. He also wrote and signed in his place the minui, in addition to saying it, not just saying it by Zoom. Because some people say, you say by Zoom, you see the person's face.
Why doesn't it work? Why doesn't the phone work?
Because it's not koilei. You have to hear Ashi Yishmu koilei, right? There's no koilei. Exactly, it's an electric current, but you see, it's more of a proof. I'm just saying there are some people which hold that it works. You can ask them. By the way, I just want to point out to you, when you have a chance to look, and since the Siman is Be'etzim talking about a Cheresh, the Tzemach Tzedek has a very interesting tshuva about a Cheresh who is deaf today. When he was a kid, he heard when they were screaming in his ear. He used to hear. Now he doesn't hear that. He speaks very little. When he got married, we're not sure if he had any power to hear anything or not. But the question is, could he be megarish now by whispering? Because he can't talk, he whispers. If by whispering he could appoint if that's considered a Shmias Koil and if it's considered a Cheresh or not. And that's in Siman Kuf Nun Ches. Kuf Nun Ches, you could look at it. It's in page 154 in the white books. The same thing, you have a summary of that tshuva, the way it was written by Tzemach Tzedek before he wrote the big tshuva. In Tzemach Tzedek Miluyim Chelek Hey Siman Mem Zayin, which is page 396 in your white book. But this tshuva, even though then it was for a specific scenario, today is more relevant, because if you're going to say a cheresh, somebody who hears with a hearing aid, and hearing aids and hearing implants could only work for people that have a little bit of koyach hashmiya, not complete deaf. So then, okay, based on this, l'chayra, it might be negei l'maaseh more than amol how to deal with such a situation. With that, we'll conclude today's share.